Hey everyone, and welcome to my series, Jumpstart Your Creativity with Justine. It's Justine Hovey, and I'm excited to show you some techniques today. I'm going to be working with some distress spray, and I'm going to be creating some graduation cards. So this Distressed Resist spray is a spray from Holtz, and you are able to emboss on top of it. So it stays wet for a period of time, not extremely long like Versamark ink, but long enough that if you have your powder out, you're good to go. So I have a box that I spray it in. So I gave it a spray here. It kind of has a milky texture to it, so you are able to see it. And then I just put it on a piece of computer paper and added my embossing powder right away on top of it. I'm going to use 3 shades of embossing powder today. I'm going to use silver, gold, and silver pearl for my card backgrounds. Now, of course, you could add more spray if you like, or less spray. It just depends on how many sprays you give your cardstock. Now, it is recommended that you spray inside a box because this is almost like a permanent adhesive. So whatever you get it on, it's hard to come off. So Holtz did recommend that when he was doing his presentations at Creativation this year. So once again, going through, this is the silver pearl embossing powder, and I'm just covering each one of my backgrounds so that I cover the liquid area that has been sprayed. I'm going to go in now with my heat tool, and I am going to start heat embossing this. Now it's the same as embossing powder, it melts at the same speed and everything, so it's just going to create this sort of splatter effect. So you can go ahead and keep continuing stamping and embossing with Versamark ink, but this is a way to create sort of mixed media grunge backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this silver pearl embossed background onto a card base. I'm going to be using this stamp set called the Tassel Time, and I'm going to use the sentiment placed onto my card base to know where to place my stars. I wanted to add some gold stars onto this, and so I placed these here on 3 different areas on the card itself so that I could emboss these in gold. I wanted something to stand out as well aside from the silver pearl background, which is very, very subtle on this card. So I covered it in gold embossing powder. I got rid of any stray embossing powder using a dry brush, and then I heat set that quickly. So now I wanted to show you what happens if you actually try to stamp on top of this distress spray. So just like embossing powder, it does resist, and because this has sort of a grunge look, it kind of goes in between the different particles that are on the paper. So you can see here that when I stamp it, it's kind of a hot mess on the left corner. So I knew that I couldn't stamp on top of it, but I knew I wanted to use this stamp because I wanted this to be a part of my card. So I went ahead and placed the stamp on top of a just spare piece of white cardstock. I stamped that using black ink, and then I went ahead and die cut that using a rectangle die from My Favorite Things so that I could actually use this on my card. So I'm using My Favorite Things Extreme Black ink, and I am stamping this a couple of times in order to get a nice impression. I went ahead and die cut it off screen, and then I went and added some 3D foam tape to the back of this. I'm just going to add this to the front of my card. That completes card number 1 with the very subtle background of the silver pearl embossing powder. Let's move on to more obvious cards that use the distress powder. Now for my next card, I'm going to be using the gold distressed look. So I'm going ahead here with this other graduation stamp that's available from My Favorite Things, and it says Congrats Graduate. It has this massive sentiment on it and the beautiful brush lettering we've come to love from MFT, and it's just so gorgeous. I just love it, and you can see it on so many sentiments in their collection. So once again, going with some black ink, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this a couple of times to get a great dark black impression. So I'm just using my MISTI here, so I'm able to stamp it more than once. I know it's not always perfect the first time, so we want to make sure that that works out really well. I also added the graduation hat from the other stamp set that I used, the Tassel Time one from the beginning of the video. So that's just added another little feature to the card itself. Now, there isn't a coordinating die with the sentiment, so I actually went ahead and fussy cut this image. I'm a big fan of fussy cutting, so it didn't bother me at all. Now, I thought there wasn't enough gold on my background. I didn't feel like there was enough to really show it off properly. So I went ahead and just simply added some more spray in my box here. And then I went ahead and just did the same thing where I added the gold embossing powder and melted it. So here's just a quick preview of how I did that. It's the exact same thing as the technique before. Now I have my Congrats Graduate all fussy cut out here. I went ahead and added some glue onto it. I mounted it onto a piece of black licorice cardstock and I fussy cut that again. So it did take a little bit of an effort for this, but I really found it worth it in the end to have this. So I went ahead, added the foam tape once again on top, and I added that to my fun gold background. And I tried to cover up some of those areas where it was really splattered on there. That's not personally my look, but if that's the look you're going for, that works out really well. And this is a fun card as well. Now on to the final card. This is the card in which it had the silver embossing powder. I'm going to grab a spare piece of Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper, and I'm going to mask this shooting star die onto it. So using my Big Shot, I'm going to send this through my die cutting machine. Masking paper cuts out just like cardstock. It's very, very thin, so it's easy to cut. I am going to be using the outline, however, of the shooting star, not the stuff that's in the middle. So I'm using the frame around it in order to do a little bit of distress oxide technique and a little bit of masking technique. So once I have that placed on there in the top left-hand corner, I'm ready to start. You can also see my embossing powder is peeking through in the embossed area. So this embossing powder is going to actually resist any sort of distress oxide ink that I'm going to be using. So I wanted to mask off the star from the actual shooting star part of it, and I'm going to go in with some various colors of distress oxide ink in order to make a nice rainbow blend. Since this isn't the feature technique of the video, I'm just going to go ahead and skip through. So I'm going in with the yellow, and then I covered that with some orange. I found the yellow a little bit too light, as well as the fact that I'm going to use the yellow for the star. So I went in with some carved pumpkin, then some picked raspberry, and then finally some wilted violet. These are the three colors, or the four colors rather, that I tend to go to every single time with my Distress Oxide inks, and they're definitely my best investments so far. In order to get such thin lines on my distress blending as well, I ended up using just the tip of my tool as I was going along, so just the very sort of edge of the circular tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and mask off the star and go ahead and distress ink blend the star in there. Now the best part is when it's revealed, so I have my shooting star with my sort of rainbow blend going through it. So I'm going to now go ahead and die cut that shooting star once again with some black paper. This is going to go directly over top of my distressed inked area. So if you thought I was kind of crazy for doing that technique before, when I put it on there, you'll see exactly why I did it. Using some liquid glue, I added glue to the back of this very thin die cut, and then I placed it directly over top of the colors that I use. I love how the black frames everything in and makes the colors look even more vibrant than they did before. I then took another die cut from My Favorite Things new release. This says Congrats, and it works perfect, of course, with the graduation stamp sets that I used. So I die cut that in black cardstock and added that to the front of my card. The last step was just simply to add this to my card base. So I wanted to add some embellishments as well that were going to really make this card stand out. My goal was to use some orange, pink, and purple and yellow Nouveau drops to just frame the card. I ended up going in with some white, and then I used the jewel drops. The jewel drops are not very vibrant and not the look that I was going for, but all of my regular solid ones seem to have dried up or plugged, so this is just going to have to do for now. I really hope that you enjoyed the 3 cards that I created using the Distress Spray backgrounds. Here's a final look at all 3 of the cards, going from the most clean and simple to the most detailed with the die cut rainbows. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you next month for another video.